In this new world, you are the product and a better you is a solution. Welcome to the People Productivity Channel, where we bring on very interesting guests who have real world tips and techniques to share with you so that you can actually become a better you. In that vein, I have somebody very interesting on today that I've known a long time, Maryfran Johnson. Interestingly, I met Maryfran when I got a call out of the blue, and she said, "Hey, I'm doing a CIO Perspectives conference in a matter of a few days, and our keynote canceled. Can you come on and do the keynote address?" And we've been great friends ever since.
Yes.
She's a super, super interesting person and will do a great job introducing herself. So Maryfran, maybe you could share a little bit about yourself with our audience.
Okay. Thank you, Frank. I'm happy to do that. And I still get a warm and fuzzy feeling when I think about you rescuing me. There's nothing more traumatic for an event organizer than to have their keynote bail out. So
Oh, can only imagine.
you forever have a warm place in my heart.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I am Maryfran Johnson. Have been so used to, over the years, introducing myself as the editor-in-chief of something or another, Computer World or CIO Magazine. Most recently, I started my own media consultancy called Maryfran Johnson Media, and I made myself the CEO and founder of that. But my day job these days, part of it is to be the host of IDG's CIO Leadership Live, which is a couple times a month. I get on camera, just like I'm doing with you today, Frank, and interview CIOs about a whole raft of topics around innovation and business transformation and all those. I have a canonical list of 10 topics we end up talking about. And I also just recently started writing a column for CIO.com about it's called Boardroom Bound, and it's all about CIOs on both sides of the boardroom table, both as members of the CEO's team presenting to the board, or eventually as corporate directors themselves. So that has been my latest new fascinating subject that I've been delving into a lot, about boardrooms and their issues and how senior technologists can eventually have more of an influence in digital governance at that level.
Now today, however, we're going to cover a topic that's very relevant to everybody, and that is your personal brand. In a gig economy, nothing really matters more than your personal brand. Everything is digital. Every individual listening has to have a digital presence out there. And Maryfran happens to be an expert on personal branding, and she does help CIOs and individuals with personal branding. So I think this is a really, really important topic, one that you're going to get some benefit from. And I guess, Maryfran, how did you get so interested in this anyway?
Well, I was just thinking as you were saying that, I don't think I always identified it as being about the personal brand of CIOs, but ever since my days, I was a reporter and then an editor-in-chief at Computer World for many years. And then after that at CIO Magazine. And my focus has always been on what eventually became the theme song for my new company, which is connecting CIOs and digital leaders with opportunity. And CIOs, the vast number of IT people, I know we'll talk about this probably a little bit more, are introverted, and they're quietly thinking before they're speaking, whereas most of our worlds are run by the extroverts who tend to speak and think while they're speaking. And so I've been at work many years trying to get CIOs a little bit more out of their shells, offering them opportunities to be on stage, interviewing them for articles, getting them involved in podcasts and now video shows. And as I started thinking more about what that's really all about, your personal brand is actually your reputation. And I think a few years ago, a lot of CIOs and a lot of IT leaders in general would cringe at the idea of having a brand. They would think about that's something that sales and marketing people do, but you've already got a brand, whether you know it or not. I mean, I could name off several attributes of Frank Wander's brand right now. It is your reputation and the way you're interacting with your network. And that's one of the things I love to identify it for CIOs and help them get more about themselves out into the world.
Yeah. And, I would say, in fact, they not only have a brand, they also have their own marketing department. And in the world we live in, of course, there is it's easy to have your own quote unquote marketing department running. But look, that's an aside. So, how do you differentiate between, the personal and professional brand? Because people really do have two. They intersect, right?
I think that they do intersect. I think that we see more about people's personal brands on social media places like Facebook, where
Yeah,
they're showing pictures of their dogs, and they're giving people more of an idea what's happening in their personal lives. And I
yeah,
think of a social media network like on LinkedIn as where you have more of your professional brand. But actually, as I've looked into this and read some books about personal branding, I think it's all one. I think the people that we are, I think, forms what our professional reputation is. And if we're someone who is well known for a
yeah.
friendly attitude and very people centric, I think that that actually applies in both sides of your life. I started thinking more deeply about branding and what our own brands are. I mean, for one thing, as you know, when you start a company, you have to be able to explain yourself to
Yes.
people. Oh, what have you got to offer? But I started thinking about this way last summer. I was at running our CIO event in Boston, and one of my speakers was this wonderful MIT professor named Hal Gregerson. And he had just a few months ago written a book called Questions Are the Answer. And it
Mm,
was all about a method that he's developed to basically help people sort through what their stories are and what their brand is and what problems they're trying to solve. And the first thing he said to me, walked up to me, and I was meeting him in person for the first time, and he walked
yeah.
up and he said, "So what's your story?"
Huh.
And I kind of talk for a living, but I found myself sort of
Yeah.
following around, and like it was almost like I was telling him my bio from my personal bio. Oh well, and I started identifying myself by all my job titles and the things I've done and that sort of stuff. And it really got me thinking about what is our own brands? What are we known in the world for? You could probably tell me a bunch of the attributes, the things that I'm known for among the CIO and the IT
Sure.
leader.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, and that really just got me thinking about what's your story? And if people can just kind of relax and think about, well, what is my story? And then make
Mhm.
sure that the world recognizes that they're not keeping it a secret. I think that that gives you a great leg up in more
Yeah.
authentically connecting to people.
Well, digging further into that,
Mhm.
how do people really figure out their own brands, and why can that be so hard to do at times?
I think that we all cringe at the notion of being self-promotional. And I know when I looked around, I was trying to upgrade and change my own LinkedIn profile. And so I
Yeah.
started studying the field and looking around for books about LinkedIn. And I'd say there's dozens of them out there now. And I'll bet 90% of them are all written for sales and marketing people who are trying to
Mhm.
use it as a sales tool. And for professionals in our world in information technology, and for people in my journalistic world and my editorial background,
Or
the
anybody
idea,
really, right? I mean,
well,
ultimately anybody.
but the idea that you're trying to pitch and sell yourself
Yeah.
has kind of a connotation that you're being deceptive somehow. So I think a few years ago you couldn't talk to CIOs about whether they had a brand. They would say, "Oh no, 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 not me. I'm not the head of marketing." And
Mhm.
but I think that so much has changed with the way companies are digitally transforming and the closeness that CIOs and other IT leaders now are getting with other parts of their business. The fact that CIOs see themselves today as business people as well as technologists, I think has led them to realize that your brand is important, and having a leadership brand is especially important.
Yeah, I think, God, I mean, people want to be able to find you and understand who you are. It is just so super important. And, it really, if people just sit down and think about it, they can get to, what their brand is. I
And
know
you can
I
get a
know,
friend, you can get a friend to help you too.
yeah,
If you're cringing at the idea of like, oh, I can't stand this, there are books on it. There's actually a lovely book by a woman named S. Renee Smith. And there are exercises you can go through. I actually think this is what a lot of people do with their leadership coaches. Whenever you
yeah,
are in a situation, the coach is helping you dig down into what really motivates you.
mhm,
How do people see you? Where are you headed in your life? What are your attributes? This sort of thing.
yeah.
You can get a lot of help with it, I think, even if you just start asking your friends.
Well, you also like Brene Brown, and
Oh, I do.
yes, and that applies to this as well, right?
Yeah. It does, because her, she's got so many. I just discovered her a few months ago. I feel like I'm the last person to the party. A
Oh, I
lot
love
of,
it. She's
yeah,
great.
a lot. Well, she's very funny. I thought that in the world of the self-help books and,
Yeah.
book, I listened to her book, The Power of Vulnerability, on my way home from a trip. And I was so struck by not only how enjoyable she was to listen to, but how totally she's nailed the human condition. The
Yeah.
fact that everybody's a little bit shy somewhere, and that when she talks about having the courage to show up and be present, I think that that's to be authentic. I think that's very much why we like doing it, why I love her work, because it is all about driving those connections and those deeper engagements with other people. That's why I love what you do with your company, and even the name of it,
Yeah.
People Productive,
Yeah.
because
Thank you.
it's a connection about, what does she say about it? Courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. And I think when we start developing and paying attention to our personal brands or our professional brands, however you're comfortable saying it, I think you're allowing yourself to be seen to the world, and you're encouraging more people to engage and connect with you.
Yeah. And the reality is, people should be proud of who they are. They should.
Well, exactly. And everybody has something they're working on. So they may not love every single aspect about themselves, but everybody's got a lot to offer. And I think that that's one of the qualities that can come across. It certainly comes across with your friends. And if you're doing well at work, it comes across with your coworkers.
Yeah.
And it's why people, what is it they say, that people don't leave a company, they quit a boss?
Oh, I think that's so true.
Isn't it? Because the human
Yeah.
condition, we want to show up and be seen by other humans, and we want people to be considerate with us and connect with us. And if you have a boss who's just not really seeing you as a human being, you don't hang around long.
No, not at all. Oh, it's miserable.
Yeah.
Miserable. I mean, let's
Sounds
face it,
like
we've
some
all,
experience there.
we've all been there.
Yes, yes. Bosses that you have to hide from.
Yeah. So, what do you recommend to people who've, now they've really thought about things, they've become authentic, they've figured out their brand, they want to go
Yeah.
really present it online. What do you recommend that they do?
Well, I always start with the professional network. I have used LinkedIn as a tool for probably 12, 15 years. I think I was one of the first people to sign up, because I used it to make friends with and connect with CIOs all over the country,
Yeah.
which fulfilled a big professional need for me to get CIOs on my stages, but also has been a really enduring personal connection that I have with CIOs. I mean, I love little features on LinkedIn where it's congratulate so-and-so for this. And, somebody just got a new position, and you always have 5 to 10 seconds to send somebody a quick note. And it's your way of acknowledging, hey, I see what you're doing in the world. Congratulations. And I just think that makes people feel good.
It really
So
does.
yeah, I think that you can hire people to help you improve
Uh-huh.
your LinkedIn brand if you're all intimidated by it. I was just having lunch with a friend of mine who is a marketing director, mind you, and
Sure.
her LinkedIn profile is terrible. She doesn't have a good headline. She doesn't have any job descriptions. There's nothing. There's an about summary that you can essentially tell people a little bit of your story, and she hasn't filled that out. And so I'm just sort of always ragging on people like it, because when I hear somebody's name, like I'm meeting somebody new, the first thing I do is go and I looked at it's essentially your living resume online. And
Yes.
you can Google people and search around, and you can find them quoted in articles maybe, or you can even investigate them if you want to online. But you can see their professional story so quickly when you go to a service like LinkedIn. And I don't think there's anything that really rivals that. I mean, everybody in the world is on Facebook, but not everybody in the world is on LinkedIn. It's very much a professional community.
Yes,
Um,
for
and
sure.
I think it's important for like our profession, for people in the technology profession, certainly people in HR, certainly sales and marketing people are all over it. But there's just so many creative and interesting ways to keep sort of an ongoing resume about yourself, about what you're doing and what you're up to. You can follow people on LinkedIn. I know I sound like a huge fangirl, but
Yeah.
it's really been a great tool to connect with a community of people and to keep building that community. I've had, when I launched my boardroom bound column,
Yeah.
I put a little thing about it. I put a link to the first column on LinkedIn, and I got all these notes from people, not just saying, oh, I like the column, but volunteering to be interviewed for the column. So,
No,
you know, it's such a
interesting.
feeling, it's a community feeling when people reach out and they say, hey, I see you're doing that and I really like it. Can I help?
Yeah.
And
Well, I would say, one thing, and, it's part of your brand, is you've always been willing to help people. Always.
mhm,
And,
I love that paying it forward concept.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And you just do it because that's you. It's really who
I
you are.
I just,
Yeah.
it is. I really, really I like to be useful. I like to help people in their careers. There's some things that I've taken on, like in my new company, I recently took on, some resume revamping for people. And
Yeah.
I discovered that I don't enjoy that kind of work. So, but I don't want someone to come to me and say, I need help with my resume and I have nothing to offer them. So now I've kind of amassed a number of people that I can send them to. I can say,
Yeah.
go talk to this person. They're much better at it than I could be.
No, that's great. That's great. So LinkedIn, you and I both love LinkedIn. I think it's just such a great resource, and
Yeah.
we get we get a lot of traffic when we post videos out on LinkedIn. Actually, it's
Yes.
a great
Yes.
community. So, what resources do you recommend to people if they want to improve their LinkedIn profile?
Well, I haven't. I have been, and I've interviewed both of these authors. So I'm a very big fan of, essentially, it's a do-it-yourself approach. But there's a woman named Brenda Bernstein. She is the
Okay.
CEO of her own company called The Essay Expert. You can find Brenda very easily on LinkedIn. She's written a book, and it's how to write a killer LinkedIn profile. And what
Okay.
I love about Brenda's book is that she updates it every year. So you know how they change and they add new features, and
Sure.
all of a sudden you can't find the privacy button to turn off, because there's ways you can like turn off your profile while you're tinkering with it. And Brenda's book kind of has all of those secrets in it, and it's completely geared to LinkedIn. And then another author, and I have an upcoming podcast next month with both of these women. I'm going to be interviewing them. The other one is Sandra Long, and she's actually a leadership coach and consultant based in Connecticut. They're both in
Okay.
Connecticut, as a matter of fact.
Hmm.
But Sandra's written a book, and it's about improving your personal branding via LinkedIn. It's something along those lines. Sandra Long and Brenda Bernstein. You can find both of them very easily on LinkedIn, and on Amazon. I mean, if you want to order the books, and both
Sure.
of their Kindle are less than $10. It's such a small investment, and because
Wise investment.
I've talked with some CIOs and they've said, help me. I want to rewrite my LinkedIn profile. And how about you take on that work? And I'm willing to do it. And then I name a price for them and they say, oh, because it
Yeah.
takes time. It's almost like revamping a resume. It's even more public. You have to hunt out your links to any place you've been, like on stage. That should be connected to your profile. And then if they're having sticker shock when I talk to them about doing the work for them, I recommend Brenda's book or
Yeah.
Sandra's book. And I say, take yourself on as a do-it-yourself project. And if you find that it's just too much work for you, come back and talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of work. I mean, I've spent quite a
Yep.
bit of time on my LinkedIn
Yep.
profile over time, and it's, one of continuous improvement.
Yes.
And I'm with you. I think people should make that investment and put some time into really becoming an expert at LinkedIn and putting their best foot forward to the world.
Well, and
So,
it's so good to do that sort of thing before you're in a rush, before
yeah,
you've heard from a recruiter who wants to talk to you about a job, and suddenly you realize that you haven't updated your LinkedIn profile in 4 years, that you have no current recommendations on there, and then you're in a lather to get it done. So
yeah,
I'm constantly just saying to people, just tinker with it, just take a look at it and I follow the news feed on LinkedIn too, which is where it really, I think, helps you stay connected to a community that is using it. And not every community uses it. I have a son who's a software engineer at Google, and
mhm,
he does hardly anything on LinkedIn. And then I have a daughter who's an addiction psychiatrist. And doctors generally don't use LinkedIn. It's just
Yeah.
not their, it's like you'll find more yoga teachers on Facebook than you will on LinkedIn. So I think that there's only certain professions, but anybody who's in a leadership or management role at a public or a nonprofit company, I think it's very likely their profile is there on LinkedIn. So they have to
Yeah.
stop and think, what am I looking like to the world?
Hmm. So let's move to the next step now. They've polished up their brand. They think it looks really, really good. How do they take that into the real world and, start the marketing piece?
Yes. Well, see, now you use that dreaded word marketing,
I know.
and a lot of
It's
professional
disconnecting.
people, a lot of people in management leadership positions feel like, oh, well, we have a chief marketing officer. So I've heard lately that it really helps, especially with technology oriented people, don't call it networking,
Hmm.
because networking, chatting people up, making small talk is something that they kind of dread. It's not a natural ability for introverts. So the term I use more often now is connecting. So how do you take your brand and then connect better with your world? And it can start in your own company. It can start with
Hmm.
speaking up in meetings more, or it can be going to a professional conference. The way I often, they would not be kicking and screaming, but I'd be dragging speakers into my conferences and they'd say, well, I can find the time to come to this, but I don't know, I don't want to do a whole presentation. And I'd say, well, then come and do a fireside chat.
Yeah.
Just come and meet, and everybody enjoys themselves when you get to any kind of a gathering, any sort of professional event. If you're a CIO, then there's tons of events you can go to, but that's true in every profession.
Yes.
Marketing,
Every profession has them.
yeah, they all have them. And it's how you behave when you get to the event. That's where you really, I think, make the connection in your head between how important your network is and how much you can expand it. A friend of mine he is a leadership coach now, but he's a longtime CIO. You may know Larry Bonfante.
Oh, sure. No,
Yeah,
Larry for many years.
isn't he wonderful? I
Great
think his
guy.
company is called CIO Bench. And he has this wonderful quote that I keep using everywhere. He tells his clients, people he's coaching, he's trying to, they're saying, oh, I don't really like making small talk and it's so agonizing. And he says, look, stop worrying about being the most interesting person in the world, in the room. Be the most interested. Walk up to someone and say, well, hey, hi, my name's Larry, and like, I'm really glad to be out today. And what are you most interested in on this agenda? Or what brings you here? Make it about the other person. And I just thought
Hmm.
that was brilliant, because it gives anybody who doesn't enjoy the chit chat at a
Yeah.
conference. And whenever I was up on stage, I would always, I would give the audience a little speech at the beginning, and I would remind them that the number one reason people go to conferences, it's not for the program, although it's good when it's a great program, and we would always
Well,
knock ourselves out to put on a good show, as you know.
you
uh,
always put on a great show. You
put on a
did.
great show, and so we
You
would really
did.
out doing that. But by far, the number one reason everybody made the time to leave their offices and come out today is to connect with other people, to network. They know that they're not doing enough professional networking. They understand the intrinsic benefits about it. In some ways, networking is almost like healthy eating. It's like people know it's good for them, but they still reach for a bag of potato chips.
Yeah.
And
They resist
people,
it.
and
Yep.
every introvert in the world of business knows that the connecting and the networking is good for them and good for their careers, but it's so much easier to just put your head down and answer that next email. So that's my first tip, is to get out in the world and use your curiosity about the people around you and what they're doing. Don't make it about yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Don't worry about being the most interesting person in the world. Be the most interested.
I was always very interested in others and their
I know
stories,
you were. No, you were.
and
Yeah.
it's just it's a powerful way to meet people. It really, really is.
Well, and I remember I think it was the very first time we met, when I had lured you out, and I was very flattered you were willing to come, because you had been doing that heads down working thing. You were at a big insurance company, I think, at the
Yeah.
time. And you had not, and they had some sort of a big issue, and you had kept a low profile for like 4 years. And
Yeah, for a
so,
number of years. Yeah.
yeah, you were out in the world, and I remember that really struck me. For one thing, I was very pleased and honored that you would like make your re-debut in the world at our
Yeah.
event. But it was also that, you didn't want to be talking about what was happening at work then. And you were being careful at that point, so you were keeping a low profile. But I'm
Well,
glad you don't do that anymore.
yeah. Hey, look, if you're going to spend time going out and, talking about, the IT industry and profession, you better
Mhm.
have your shop running well, or you should be focused on making sure it's running well.
And
You
that's
know,
why it's so hard to get CIOs or any kind of leadership position people to come out and give a talk if they're just within the first year on their job, because
yeah.
everybody wants to have those results to point back to. And it's too bad, because in a way, what you're doing to get to the results, I think, is actually can be more interesting. The people in the room listening to you can be learning from what you're doing.
Mhm.
Um, I have a whole spiel I do with IT, especially IT leaders who are they really don't think of themselves as good presenters, and that's okay. You don't need to be the star of the show. Volunteer to be on a panel. Volunteer to moderate a panel at one of your professional organizations. You can just Google how to moderate a great panel or how to be a good
Yes.
panel, and you'll find a bunch of really great advice. And it puts you on stage, it gets you out there, and you're not carrying the whole show yourself. So anytime I have a lot of CIOs I know that are now very happy to step up to the
Yeah.
microphone, I got them started years ago by talking them into being on a panel. And this is, all about making those connections and reaching out and doing things for people. And that's how you build your network. It's not about how many business cards you collect at conference. It's who did you really connect with as a human being? How did you engage?
Sure. And there are other ways, obviously, for people to connect and expand their
Mhm.
professional networks, which helps build their brand. Maybe you've got some other suggestions.
I do. I do. If you're not into going to a conference, then look around at volunteering to be on an advisory board.
Mhm.
Your Any of the vendors your company is dealing with might have a customer advisory board that they would really like your input on. You can, of course, there's lots of volunteer opportunities. Nonprofits have advisory boards to be on. You can make it a point to join professional groups in your area. Like for IT people, the Society of Information Management, there are SIM groups and there's a SIM women group, and there are chapters in every state in the union. I'm going at the end of this week, I'm going to be out in Utah, and it's a group that's called, I think it's the AIM, AIM, and it's the AIM Utah CIO Summit.
Okay.
And I think it might be Association of Information Management. It kind of doesn't matter what the letters
Yeah.
stand for. It's just that you're getting together with other professionals who are in the same sort of work that you're doing. If you're a healthcare executive, there's a couple of very IT centric, the hymns and chime, and every profession has a professional organization. Sometimes there's dues. In fact, often there is. These volunteer organizations have to support themselves somehow. And I know, because I do a lot of talks at these kind of places. And they always, when they get me on the phone, they're like, "Oh, we'd love to have you come, but of course we have no budget."
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, that's
you're
the
like, "All
classic.
right." That's part of paying it forward, because you'll make friends, you'll find people, and then someday you'll hit them up for a favor. Come and talk about what you're doing with artificial intelligence at your company, and you learned about it at one of these events. So I think there's always, when you pull your head up out of your email and look around in your own company, there's often organizations and groups that you can join. Google is famous for this. My son is
Mhm.
involved in several different groups internally at Google, and it helps him get around the company and get to know different people in different areas, and that opens up new opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. The world is your oyster if you're willing to go out and network and make relationships and really be authentic and put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And honestly, all of this, I think really does tie in this whole notion of personal branding to those individuals who maybe are boardroom bound, which is your new column,
Yes, that
right?
is.
This stuff matters. I mean, this is how you might actually land something. Let's talk about that for a minute as kind of a
Okay.
way to close out the interview.
I know, my very favorite subject. Thank you so much. I was just, there's a lot of talk these days in the industry. Every single company in the world, it seems, has got a transformation project going on. There's so much excitement going on between IT and business groups finally getting together. But when as I was starting my new company, I was thinking about, what are the unmet needs? What are the things that CIOs are very interested in, but can't find a lot of information about? And it has just become so obvious to me over the last couple of years, especially as chief information officers and other IT leaders advance in their career, they have a gleam in their eye when they think about being on a board. It's a very natural next step for them.
Sure.
So I pitched the idea for the column to Amy Bennett, who is the editor-in-chief of CIO.com, and she loved the idea because, you know, a couple of times a year there would be a story that would show up about how to talk to the board or how to get a seat on the board, but there was not anybody paying a lot of specific attention to it. And so I adopted this as my cause. I've had so many
Great.
CIOs very interested in it, and it's just a wonderful topic because it's about growing your connections and your networks. There's a column that was just published last week about how different it is to network for a board seat. You have to know business people, not just people in your profession or with your job title, but you have to know a wider circle of people, and it's mostly word of mouth. Somewhere between 70 to 80% of the seats on boards are referrals. It's one of the last bastions of the private club. And what's really good, I think, especially for women and for people of color and for diversity, these days it's very au courant in the boardroom world for them to be looking to add a few other diverse points of view to the board. The average, like if you look at public boards in the United States, the average board member is middle 60s and he's a white male. And, you know, I mean, I love people in their 60s. I have a husband who's in his 60s who's a white male, but it's a certain way of looking at the world. And now more women, and especially more people with diverse backgrounds, like in technology or in cybersecurity, in areas that the board doesn't necessarily have expertise in and could use a little different perspective. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities. And so many CIOs, I think, probably think that, oh, you get recruited, like the way they get calls from recruiters and they go and they interview for a job. Networking for a board seat is entirely different. It comes back to what we started talking about in the first place, about your network and and the way you are engaging with people out in the world. And you can start out by getting, in fact, if you don't want to go and parade around on a conference stage, start looking around and letting it be known in your professional and personal circles that you're really interested in serving on a board. And it can be a board, a small nonprofit company, it can be a small private company. I mean, you don't have to go shooting to be on the board of Time Warner. You know, you can just, it's all about relationships, and it's how you connect and engage with other people. And when you think about all the wisdom and the background that the people we know bring to the table, all that technology understanding, and you know how we've always talked about IT having a helicopter view of the whole company, about how all the parts work together. Think about how valuable that is to bring to a board.
Yeah, it's super valuable. And, you know, whether they're going for a board seat or they have some other life objective that they want to accomplish, this personal branding is just going to be very important. Building those relationships, letting people know who your authentic self is.
Yes.
All of this is ultimately going to lead, hopefully, where you want it to go.
Well,
So,
yeah, recognizing that even if you've never given it a thought, you've already got a brand.
yeah,
It's more about, what is your brand? Is it being well represented by you out in the world? You know, if somebody bumps into, you know, they're at a company conference and somebody bumps into a friend of yours and they say, oh, well, I really could use somebody with this kind of expertise. Does your name come to mind for them? Are you an expert in AI, and does everybody know that? Are you an incredibly great boss who every time you go to a new company, there's a whole phalanx of people that go with you? I'm always, whenever I run into somebody a CIO who is once again working with these 2 or 3 people that followed them there, you know you're talking to a great leader. You're talking to somebody that people are willing to follow. And they did that by being their authentic selves in the world.
For sure. So listen, any parting thoughts or ideas as we close out this interview? And thank you so much for being on. I think it's a great
It's such
topic.
a pleasure. Always love talking to you, Frank. And I think the only I love coming back to recommending that book I mentioned at the beginning. Questions are the answer. Now,
Yeah.
this my own background. I loved the book. I thought that it was the kind of book that everybody could learn from. I remember years ago reading one of the I think Decisive is one of their books. The two guys from the University of South Carolina, Chip and Dan Heath, have
Okay.
written a whole bunch of books that are wonderful at that kind of introspection that turns into connection with people.
Yeah.
And that's what I liked so much about the Questions Are the Answer book, is when you start, that's actually one of the ways to dig your way into your personal brand. Sit down and start asking yourself a bunch of questions about it. So I think that it's just great to get out there among other people. And it's not something that anybody has a particular talent at that they're born with. It's something that I think you develop as you talk and interact with other people. And ultimately, I think on the job, it's what makes you more productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for
Mhm.
all of our listeners, remember, you are the product and a better you is a solution. I hope you found this information that Maryfran has shared very valuable. You can do a lot with your personal brand and still be an authentic person who's just helping others out. So listen, thanks so much for coming on. It's been great and hope to see you soon.
Yes, that'd be great, Frank. Take
Take
care. Bye
care.
bye.
Bye.